Hello world, this is Stefan of Landrigan Games. I've gotten a foundation for a roguelike after copying How to Build a Roguelike from Scratch by Thoughtquake. Now, before you write me off as the no-talent blowhard that I am, just remember that Picasso might have said, good artists borrow, great artists steal. And that means I'm actually a great developer, so stop calling me a hack! Anyway, I owe an additional debt of gratitude to DeadLucky32 for his helpful comment on the tutorial. While painstakingly following the instructions, I just couldn't get the Fog of War to work correctly. I assumed it was something that I did wrong because 9 times out of 10 that assumption's correct. That assumption cost me a few days, but it turns out that the current version of Godot works a little differently now, so I wasn't entirely at fault this time. Now that everything finally works as intended, though, I'm going to start adding equipable items and refining character visuals. Also, because I'm now iterating instead of laying foundation, I'm hopeful that the next update will come more quickly. Meanwhile, in Roger Debris' RTS, he does have the calculations per second problem under control, so 200 units on the battlefield currently isn't a problem. Instead, after creating a melee, a ranged, a harvesting, and a defensive unit, the conundrum is now the classic, where do we go from here? I'm not soliciting any suggestions from the audience, mind you, that's just where things currently are. Now, before I go into my ramble, if you enjoy it or the types of games being made, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell for... I wish notifications actually worked. If you enjoy these devblogs, either come to LendriganGames.com and join the mailing list, or join the Lendrigan Games Discord, link in the description. I also invite anyone who enjoys cooperative gaming to join the Discord. With the recent expose about a certain company's insane crunch culture, I've decided to toss my hat into this ring with my own conclusion about the true evil of crunch and crunch culture. While I don't have any direct experience with game development crunch, and would much prefer to keep it that way, I do have some secondhand experience about it, along with other revelations that I've gleaned over time, so I do hold some confidence in my diagnosis. The first part of my assessment is that where there are deadlines, there is crunch. That truth is inescapable. I remember talking with a teacher about workload, and we agreed that one all-nighter a month is doable, but an all-nighter every week is too much. When I worked a factory job, every once in a while we suddenly got a big order that needed to be filled quickly, and presto, we had some crunch ahead of us. Part of me reflexively thinks I shouldn't have to say that not all crunch is evil, but the wanton implementation of crunch culture is what makes crunch look as destructive as it does. Julian Lefay, may his name be forever praised, when mentioning his ascension to becoming a 10x programmer, ascribes his evolution to crunch, because few things teach you to work quickly quite as effectively as does needing to get things done quickly. Also, at the time of writing this, a friend of mine is currently going through crunch because the publisher set a deadline and things didn't get done as quickly as they originally had hoped. From what I've gathered, nobody is particularly at fault, it's just that there's a deadline and crunch is needed for the latest stretch. Now, the second part of my assessment is that the crunch culture problem in video game development isn't unique to video games. I've yet to hear Yong Yan or Jim Sterling mention that the game development style of crunch is rampant across software production in general. Operating systems, anti-malware, word processors, calorie counting software. Almost all types of software have experienced grueling, hazardous crunch. Granted, I refuse to fault the talking heads for not connecting their information outside of their wheelhouses for the sake of what's essentially trivia, but it is easy for their audiences to lose track of the bigger picture and presume video game development to be the only or worst slave market in the tech industry. For my diagnosis, I look to the Lorax. Under the best intentioned circumstances, it's regardlessly easy to get swept up in getting those features to work, losing time and resources along the way because the tunnel vision doesn't let the developer see what's being lost. Consequently, safeguarding against scorched earth requires answering this question. How much stress is too much? Of course, one more reason life is hard is because, like the biker's bonk, the answer can't be accurately solved on paper until it is physically encountered. With most indie studios, by the time they need to answer the question, they're typically already in too deep and inescapably entrenched, like an even more sympathetic Onceler. With AAA studios, though, things get deeper and worse. The AAA problem is easily summed up with the platitude, people are our greatest asset. Myself, I hold a psychological aversion to the phrase human resources because I don't yet traffic them. With the workers defined as collective ledger lines rather than individuals, upper management is afforded the luxury to refuse to answer how much is too much, and therein lies the nature of the crunch culture beast. When a worker can no longer stand the crunch, management has both the means and the incentive to replace him with someone who can. Just because someone can no longer keep up is no reason for the entire company to slow down to accommodate one individual. Even if several workers fall by the wayside, replacement serves the company more than does reparation. Of course, things get even more cursed once solutions are discussed. Despite the insistence of people who have emotions, compassion is a limited resource, and any individual's heart can bleed only so much so many times before the blood runs out. Assuming good intention, how can a CEO keep track of and treat 200 workers individually, while also giving adequate attention to ensuring he'll be able to cut all of their next paychecks? Furthermore, at what point has the company conceded so much to the individual that it no longer has leadership nor direction? That said, Naughty Dog's and BioWare's leadership still deserves all the dogpiling they've received.